Hello again, I'm Sean with Carter's Farm Mobile Petting Zoo, and I'm working today with chickens.org on how to set up your first spot that you're going to put your baby chickens when you bring them home for the first time. Now, typically when you go to the stores or you're picking up baby chickens, you're going to get them at a day or two old. That's just how it goes. They already have the tools they need to survive. You don't have to teach them how to eat. You don't have to teach them how to drink, and you don't have to feed them a bottle. They take very little care to make that happen, but we do have to make sure we take special care in the right things to keep them alive. Any baby is fragile. Baby chickens are probably more fragile than most, okay? So right off the bat, we need to have an enclosure that we can keep them in so they don't wander off and get lost, because they aren't going to have any kind of territorial instincts, and they don't have a mom to look at that they're going to follow around like they would in the wild, or if you let your chicken hatch them. I like to use baby cribs. I have 4 kids at home. They're all grown, so I have a couple of these laying around. We save them and we use them for our baby chickens. There's some good things about it, and there's some bad things about it. We're going to talk about what you need to make sure that your whatever container you use, whether it be a cardboard box, a plastic tote, or something that you make out of wood, anything can work as long as this small bit of criteria can be matched. I have mesh here on this. One of the main things that'll kill a baby chicken is a slight draft, which means if you have them inside the house and you have a ceiling fan on, that draft alone can be enough to keep the chickens from being able to stay warm, and that can kill them. So a draft of any sort, if they're outside, if they aren't protected from any kind of a breeze or wind, that can be all it takes to take out your baby chicken group. So on something like this, we keep ours inside the house when they're brand new babies. We live in Arizona. We can get away with that most of the time with just a few common things. If you live in a spot where it snows, you're not going to be able to get away with keeping them outside during the time. I can raise mine outside and not have any problems. I just choose to keep them inside because of the draft feature that what my container holds, and I can check on them all the time. I love to pay attention to my baby chickens. So the first thing you need to have is a spot you can put them in. Solid walls is excellent as far as a plastic tote, a cardboard box, anything that you can have. There's less of a draft, and we can cover that with a towel or a blanket and keep that draft out and really control the heat inside the pen that we're going to have them in. So here at the farm, we like to use pine shavings, but not everybody has access to get the kind of things that I'm going to show you today. So I'll try to give you alternatives that you can use. You can use dirt. You can use wood shavings that you have. You can use rocks. You can use anything that you can to keep the chickens off the ground surface and something you can clean out. Leaves, whatever you need to do, paper towels, newspaper, all that stuff. It's better if you use something that is more natural, because that is what they're going to naturally want to scratch through. Newspaper, things like that, they're going to tear it up and move them. But on a bedding with dirt or leaves, something they can move around, it's not a bad idea. So that's what you're going to want to use. So bedding is the first thing that you want to put down. Now that's not as necessary for survival as some of the other things that we're going to talk about. All right, some of the things that I use for food and water. We've got a feeder here that allows the baby chickens to put their head in, but doesn't allow them to get in and scratch it all over the place, because they really will spread it out. They'll spread it into their water. They'll spread it everywhere. And then while they will naturally go and look for it and eat it, you can't tell when they're out. So we like to fill this up, and if they scratch some out, it's no problem. We just keep it full all the time. This is the water dish we like to use, especially if you have a lot of chickens. They will go through this, a gallon water container, and they will go through this quite quickly. There are all different kinds of water containers. They have 5 gallon, they have bigger. You can do an automatic water container. Whatever you do, you have to make sure that it's not big enough for them to crawl into, especially the first week, because they can just lay down in it and they die. And one of the things that's going to kill a baby chicken is cold and wet. Those two things are not a good combination. This just screws off. You fill the bottom piece, put the top piece on, and it fills up on its own. Okay, now let's say again we go back, we don't have those things in your area. That's no problem. We can take our Tupperware and use that. I would use something like this for the food. Oh, put some in, put some out, and just fill that up, and we can put that right inside their cage. They will crawl in this and scratch it out, but it's better to have food than to not have any food. So you can fill that up very easily with a cup of the food you choose. And the food you want to choose for your babies is always going to be a chicken starter. Starter's the key. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is going to have the right amount of nutrients in there to not promote egg production at an early age, which can actually do some damage to your chicken if they have too much protein early on. If your chicken is the one that did the hatching, you can certainly let them run around with mom up until a few weeks old and then bring them inside if you choose to. There's always the dangers of something coming and getting them. Moms can only do so much, where when we have them in a protective enclosure, we can actually get the rate of survival much higher oftentimes. So food. And then for the water, we talked about it being that they can drown very easily. If you're gonna use a Tupperware dish, if you're gonna cut the top off of a water bottle, if you're gonna use anything that you can come up with that holds water or food, as long as it's not too sharp, you can use it. It can be a cardboard box, whatever you wanna use, whatever you have laying around. It doesn't have to be fancy for your chicken to have everything it needs to survive. So forget all the fancy stuff if you don't have it. Just make sure they have food and water, and that water can't get everywhere, because if everything gets wet, your chicken loses its chances of survival very, very quickly. So we put rocks in our water dish to keep them. If they were to hop in there, make a bad choice and jump in, they can hop right back out again because it's not too deep. So always check your food and water. Those are crucial. Now, the last piece for survival, food, water, and now we're talking about warmth. If your chickens get too cold, they will die. If they get too hot, they will die. We like to use here on the farm a regular heat lamp. You can use a heat lamp, or you can use a heating pad. You cannot or should not use a heating fan. We talked about earlier that draft, even if it's warm, can be enough to wipe out your baby chickens. So we don't want drafts early on. So you want to use a heating lamp, and these are very hot. We keep them up high, and we put it to one side or the other, because your chickens need to find the right spot. I don't know how hot they need to be. I'm not in here. They're gonna know. If it's too hot, they're gonna slide over. If it gets too cold, they're gonna slide back. They'll do that on their own. So you have to give them a hot side and a cold side and let them decide where the right spot is for them. But remember to keep your water and food away from the heat. They can travel to that and then go back to where they're gonna rest. And they should rest in a group anyway, which is automatically gonna make it a little bit warmer. So if they're not directly into your heat source, it's okay. They'll go where they need to go based on how hot it is inside their closure. So again, if you have a solid enclosure, it's gonna hold that heat far easier, and you may even want your heat lamp higher. Now, we said heat lamp. This light bulb that's in here gets extremely hot. I have a guard on here because heaven forbid it gets knocked and this falls and tries to touch something. It's less likely to catch something on fire. And if something's gonna catch on fire, it's gonna always be when you're not home. So you need to be very, very careful with the heat source and have it on very securely, so you don't have to worry about it touching a cardboard box, a plastic tote. All that melts. This here can catch on fire. This is something that you have to be very, very aware of with everything you do. So if this were to fall or fall off, this guard right here is gonna be the difference between something catching on fire and potentially giving me an extra day before something catches on fire, because it's still very hot. It could give me enough time that I need to come home. I'm not gonna leave this running if I leave town for the weekend for my baby chickens. I won't do it. That's too much of a hazard. These things are known to do some damage. So that's one of the main things, a good spot and giving them a chance to get from one side to the other with your heat source. If you do have a container like this and you're gonna keep them outside, you can wrap blankets around it. You can put anything you can to block wood, whatever you wanna do to block that draft, and then hang something over the top, just enough that you can keep that. But remember, anything that's close to this heat lamp is a potential fire risk. I can't stress that enough. You wanna make sure this is in a spot that you don't have to worry about it touching something else and catching it on fire. This is the most dangerous part of having baby chickens, in my opinion, for everything. So we do keep this in our house. We have had them fall and heat up some pine shavings and things like that, but we've never had anything catch on fire because this guard right here has saved us every single time. So I have something I built that I literally screw this into so it can't fall anymore. Nothing scarier than coming home and seeing something like that. So that's one of the main things. So no draft, food and water that they can get to, and heat. If you can do those 4 things, you will be very successful in raising your chickens to become full-grown adults and start giving you the eggs that you were looking for in the beginning. On behalf of Carter's Farm and chickens.org, thank you very much for hanging out with us today and learning a little bit more about chickens and what you can do to have chickens at home. And don't forget to send us your videos right here that you have of your chickens. We'll post them if they make the cut, and we want to see what you have going on your farm.